Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Service Strategy Labs. This series is meant to be your ultimate resource for uncovering the possibilities of AI for complex service environments, and we address common topics that service leaders have around AI and provide insights from experts in the field. So, I am your host, Roy Dockery, advisor, consultant, leadership coach and I believe that businesses are like people, right? They're individually unique and designed with a purpose. So there is no cookie cutting allowed. So today's topic, we're going to talk about bridging the knowledge gap with service resolution intelligence. And we're going to jump right in as everyone continues to join. I want to introduce the speakers that we have today to address this topic. So can I get a brief introduction from both of you? We'll start with Dave and then go to Josh.
Hi, I'm Dave Hartley. I'm the Vice President of Customer Care for Translogic, a Swisslog healthcare company. And I run basically the service department and call centers and training for our field techs.
Thanks, Dave.
Hi, I'm Josh Elliott. I'm the Director of Customer Care Centers for Translogic. Work for Dave. I run all the remote support teams, so software support call centers, these kind of activities.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So today we're talking about the knowledge gap, right? And we talk about a talent shortage. We talk about an experience shortage, especially in service and in skilled trades from an industry perspective. So just to define the knowledge gap, right? Like what we're calling the knowledge gap is that difference between what the I guess the general or the generic candidate has and the information we need them to have to be successful in our particular role in our particular organization, right? So sometimes that knowledge gap is due to experience, right? Industry differences. Sometimes it's because you have proprietary equipment, proprietary software. There's no way anyone could know that information unless they were working for you. But I think what we find in both field services and support services, we have a lot less people that are going into trades, but then a growing industry that continues to need the type of skill sets, right? The hands-on work, the troubleshooting, the diagnostic ability and aptitude that people have, right? So for you all, like, what are some of the things that, and we'll start with Josh on the, you've got a broad organization, right? Software support, remote support, technical support. What are some of the initial knowledge gaps that you see between like candidates and then like what do you need for someone to be successful?
First we have product specific knowledge, and in a product like ours, where we're in thousands of hospitals, they have a lot of different configurations and uses. So we can train to specific devices and kind of mechanically and electronically how it works, but how it interacts in a larger system that's specific to a site is a whole other ballgame, and you can't teach every one of these. So once we get beyond the basic knowledge of troubleshooting, it gets a lot more complicated and harder to document for and train to without just a crazy amount of hours spent in OJT and that kind of thing. I'd say the other huge challenge that we run into is IT networking knowledge. As we move into customer networks that are more and more secure and complicated, we can't hire at a technician 2 level for networking and these kind of things. And be reasonable with our budgets and these kind of things. So we have to have a way to be able to get to answers where we can speak kind of the language that IT departments speak without having IT professionals ourselves on every phone call.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And Dave, what about on the field service side, especially for those that are out, in front of the customer, face of the customer, hands on the equipment?
Yep, you kind of hit the nail on the head. Young people are not going into field service because they don't know what it is, right? They're told from probably the 3rd grade on that you got to go to college, get a degree, and go work in an office. So we have a limited pool to start with to try to find people. So we may not have the technical skills or the troubleshooting knowledge that we had 20 years ago. So to help bridge that gap, we went and got a tool like Neuron7 or Neuron7 itself. So that, it can help them figure out what a problem is, but also if they really start thinking about it, they start to put 2 and 2 together and learn to troubleshoot because the tool is helping them do that. It also prevents burnout from our experienced technicians, right, of taking phone calls from 30 different technicians across the U.S. because they know how to fix a problem, which was a big problem we were having in the field. Was I'm not getting my work done because I'm on the phone all day with new people you're hiring, hire better techs, with more experience. And as Josh pointed out, when you hire someone that's been in the industry for 20 years, that's not a starting level position from a salary standpoint, so it kills your budget, and so it was kind of a twofold problem we were trying to resolve all at once.
Yeah, no, and that's a great point, right? And when you talk about the service operations impact, like that gap, it has to be filled by something, right? So it's, you either have to fill it with money from a budgetary perspective and hire people with more experience. You've got to fill it with the technology, right? Or you've got to fill it with, or you've got to just fill it with knowledge that's being borrowed, to your point, from the senior technicians, the senior support people, and then so you're losing efficiency there, right? So you're losing a fifth of each of your senior individuals because they're spending a lot of their time engaging with junior techs. So with that, like, how did you all, like, what did the journey look like for Translogic to start capturing some of that expert knowledge and getting it, like, tangible and at the fingertips of more junior people, or even just people, to Josh's point, that I may have seen the technology, but I haven't seen this configuration, right? So maybe this configuration is different than what I'm used to, whether it's digital or analog, right? The age of the equipment and the technology that's available out there as well. So what were some of the steps that you all went through to kind of capture some of that expert knowledge and take that burden from the more senior techs and the more senior support agents and start putting that into a system that can make it tangible to people who basically have to learn how to ask the right question?
So that was kind of a two-step process. The first step was we wanted an easy win. So we released the tool called the Intelligent Search, where you can type in a question and it'll go through your documents, spit you out the, like, say, I want to look up how to change a motor plate seal in our industry is a big deal. You could type that in and it's going to take you right to the procedure in the manual in under 3 seconds. So we got that out to the field and we got them to start using that, right, to believe in the tool. Because what you're going to face is, I already know all this stuff. Why do I need to know it, right? Especially from your senior guys. What they noticed was maybe they weren't using the intelligent search, but the new techs were, and the phone calls started to drop to them, and they were like, hey, this is kind of nice, and they started believing in the tool. So when we went into the diagnostics intelligence tool, which is where you use the case history and basically you're collecting that knowledge base from all across your industry or your technicians across the country, they were more in tune to jump in there and say, hey, if I provide this information, then the call volume that I'm going to take goes down even more. And so we made some of these senior guys that we knew had the knowledge. We made them our champions, our subject matter experts, and got them to, all right, let's start going over some of this stuff, right? Let's review and what we learned was our data wasn't very good, right? A technician, and I am guilty as anyone else when I was a technician in the field, I fixed it. What more do you need to know? I fixed it. It's all good. You have nothing to worry about, right? That doesn't help the next guy come along. So they started to see that, and it's funny. I say I have 120 different tech writers out there now, because they're starting to write like a tech writer, putting in exactly, this is how I fixed this step and did this step, because they know if they do that, then the tool picks that up, and it helps them in the future, maybe helps someone else, and they're not taking a phone call, so they can get their work done and get home faster. So that was kind of how we rolled it out. Now, I would like to say it was that smooth. I'm hard-headed. I said our information was good, and we fell right on our face, but that was because of me and some economic pressure from the CEO. But we recovered pretty quickly from that. We learned our lesson, did our due diligence, got the information correct, got the buy-in from some of our guys I knew would be a challenge, and put them on the team to do that. And then since we've done that, the adoption is just increased as we keep using, each month after each month. So
yeah, I appreciate that, Dave. And Josh, I want to pivot to you, right? Because I know you oversee the support team, right? The software team. So you had an org that probably had more access to information already, right? Like they weren't just working from phones or tablets, right? They've got a couple of screens, they're stationary, right? So and especially combating that, like I know where it is, I know where to find it, right? Because they're used to doing that. But your team is supporting not only just the field, but you're also supporting customers in that regard as well. So what did you see with the adoption of that, right? And trying to get them to bridge over to using a tool when a lot of people had their processes set up, right? They're alt tabbing, they're switching between Chrome browsers, and kind of like, how do you kind of break up that that process, right? And kind of get them to be to not be detractors, but to be like adopters and champions of like a new technology.
Yeah, I mean, it's selling the utility of it. And going back to what Dave was talking about, I thought of, especially intelligent search at first, it was how we bridged the gap between tribal knowledge and making it accessible. For instance, we have a knowledge-based article program. So technicians in the field and the CCC, they create these articles that address specific issues. But then, like you said, a tech in the field doesn't necessarily have access to a whole library very simply, or how to navigate to the right items. But this search means it is available very simply and quickly to everyone. So the guys on the phones, of course, sitting in front of their computer, they can browse through a library, find the right documentation, help somebody out. Or what we found is we're often browsing for documents to send to the techs because they don't know how to locate it themselves, or they don't have time or the access while they're in front of a customer. This changed that. It's just, again, it's getting them to use it a few times and see the utility. We really have a lot of adoption, like Dave said, with new guys coming in their training process, right? I see huge spikes in the usage when we have guys preparing for their certification boards and testing, and when they're going to be in training for the equipment. So now they know how to find the right document, and then they start learning the right things about the right equipment as we go. The diagnostics was more of a challenge Dave alluded to. We had bad data in the system. Me and my teams are guilty of that, of course, as well. We don't want to type too long, but part of the amelioration process for that actually helped with adoption. And I think Dave referred to this as well. We got together some senior technicians from around the country who normally we would think is probably resistant to this kind of thing. Don't tell me how to troubleshoot. But we brought them in and said, you tell everybody else how to troubleshoot. So we built a compendium of troubleshooting everything we could think of over a few weeks. And then we plugged it into the system along with other data we migrated. And now suddenly we can trust the information that's in the tool. And as it's building on that, as people use it, it just gets more and more precise and more useful. And the cruft gets cut up, right? So it's just getting them into it and having one eureka day or moment when it works for them. And then it's over, right? We've got them. The adoption process in the CCC, again, if there's a shortcut for them to get to the right document or point someone to the right place, I can convince them to do that. Right? If it's shortening a process rather than asking them to do more stuff, I'm not that charismatic, but even I can force somebody to do that. So, whoa, my lights.
Motion sensing. No worries. But no, and that's great. And so, Josh, you touched on it a little bit. So, right, like when we talk about like the strategies to get buy-in from the team, right, and the other stakeholders. So field services is one organization, and Dave, I'll kind of pivot it to you, right? You've got finance, you've got engineering, right? You've got the other groups, like you said, that have their technical writers and their technical documentation. So like, what were some of the things that you had to do to kind of, I guess, like represent the problem to like a broader audience to get that buy-in and that participation from the rest of the org as well, right? Because it's got to need a couple hands raised when you want to spend some money, right, at any organization. So like, what was some of the stuff that you did to kind of even bring in some of your cross-functional partners as well?
Yeah, it's funny. Tribal knowledge is big in field service and the service industry, but when you talk to finance, they don't care. Right. So I worked with Neuron7 quite a bit. We put together a good business business plan, and the return on investment was big on the warranty cutting our warranty cost,
Okay.
and our parts replacement. I would make the argument we were well down the path of being board replacers, because that is kind of the direction most field service teams have done. I understand that the days of component level troubleshooting are probably over for the most part, unless you're in a bind. But what you don't want to do is just start swapping boards and just go down the line and cost yourself a couple of grand and cost just on parts. So, I got finance to buy in with the reduction on warranty because they love hearing that number. And I got engineering to help support this by saying, well, if I can use intelligent search, the diagnostic tool, maybe I'm not escalating as many things to tier 3 level. And I'm letting our engineers develop instead of sustain. So that's over that. And then the CEO, basically those two things together, along with, my first grandchild maybe could be named after him, something like that, to get that to buy in. But I'm just kidding. No, he was well on board. But
No, that's a good point, right? Because like you said, you've got those different metrics, and that's why I say like businesses are like people; they're all unique. But which one of those actually moves the needle? Because even with engineering, depending on your company, sometimes warranty belongs to engineering. Sometimes warranty from a budget perspective belongs to service. So it's like, that's your problem, right? Like you said, from a knowledge capture perspective, you've got to have the right term. So I like the fact that, you kind of spoke the finance language and was like, hey, like we can reduce some parts costs, we can reduce some waste. Then you go to engineering, and to a very good point, when you're using technology that's interjecting intelligence, right? It should be shifting resolutions left, right? So to your point, if it was formerly in tier 3, because we couldn't find that obscure technical bulletin or that random document that no one remembers, or that thing that engineering pushed out that no one saw in that email, now it's putting it right in front of the technician, and you're not disturbing that software engineer or that developer, to your point, who wants to be programming and not doing sustaining efforts to resolve problems or to improve the current thing, right? And so you start building that, you build a coalition to a certain degree of like everybody gets to do more of what they want to do, right? Like you mentioned, the senior techs don't really want to be answering 9 phone calls a day to answer easy questions. The senior techs still want to be the expert, right? They still want to offer the complex question. They just don't want to offer they don't want to answer the simple question. They don't want the alley-oop, right? They want something that's going to challenge them mentally, and allow them to really kind of show their technical prowess. But it's the same thing. A software engineer doesn't want to tell you to reset it when that's the answer, because you didn't know that, or to do this basic sequence of things that was already documented. So like everybody kind of wants to do the hard stuff. But the challenge is, and Josh, you mentioned it earlier, when the systems are complex, when the technology is complex, there's a lot of things that create a challenge that it may not be like the technical difficulty of the thing. It may be the configuration, the software version, right? That particular release, or some of those things kind of in alignment as well. So, and so that's good there. And so we talked about like the culture, and kind of how we're using the technology to bridge that gap. So like, well, let's go to retention a little bit, and sharing of that information. So you all mentioned like you brought in some experts, right? Let them kind of throw things at the at it. Can we want to kind of dig a little bit down into that? Like, how did you and how are you handling like that transfer of knowledge from the experts, especially the ones that have given you their 12-month to 18-month notice, right? I'm a former Swisslog person. I know people be like, I'm retiring next year. I'm retiring next year. I'm retiring next year. And then when they finally retire, you actually get 2 months notice, not the whole year, right? So what are you all doing now to kind of capture that knowledge from retiring experts, and how is that getting into the hands more efficiently of the new team members? And I'll start with Josh on that one, on the remote teams, and especially because the software transitions so frequently, right? Hardware, it's a lot harder, but like software, you got a new revision and a new release and a new pack and a new security thing. So it's constant, right? So like the new information and the old information is constantly changing. So how's one of those ways that you're kind of transferring that knowledge or gathering it from your more senior and skilled experts?
So the diagnostic tool, that's kind of what it does for us at a certain level. That's why we want people who know the answer to use the tool anyway. Is because then you're reinforcing those paths to success for each one of these crazy issues that comes up that you don't see very often, or they're amending a process for a different software version, or they're adding a new one for a weird thing they ran into. So if they use this day to day, even if they're not using it because they don't know what to do, but they're using it to help the next guy down the line, then we're already bringing that info in. So I don't have to ask them to write an article, right? In this instance. I'm happy with an article. We could still use the search and find it, but now we are capturing some of those things where one day, or 3 years ago, this guy runs into it and then it pops up again a week from now and he's not even on the team and nobody knows what to do. Well, we've captured that now and it's in a natural process. I tell the system, here's my symptoms, and it gives me ideas of where to go from there. And if we've run into it before, now there's a lot higher chance that we know how to deal with it again instead of asking around to see who dealt with it the last time. So part of that is just taken care of organically through the use of the tool, even if you're not using it in the moment because you already know what to do. You're helping everyone else in the organization now and in the future. Besides that, it's engagement, right? If they're using these tools and they're seeing the good works that come from it, they're going to be more excited about that. And they're going to be more willing to share that information because they know it's actually going to get to somebody, right? You can ask somebody to write an article and they may or may not have their heart in it because they're like, nobody's ever going to see this or nobody's ever going to know where to find it. But now I can see somebody else, a junior technician or something, plug into the tool and use it. And as we use it, it tells us the percentage of time that the things they enter are being used. So you get the gratification and the pride in knowing that you're contributing to things. And all of that has to do with retention and also passing knowledge along. You got to want to.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point. And like you said, when the system, right, the challenge is always getting the people who know to use it, right? So if it's like, okay, we're bridging this knowledge gap, like if I'm on the other side of the bridge, you're asking me to reach back, right? Instead of like, I'm over here, I've got the knowledge, I've got the experience, I understand it. So it's really good to say that you're just making that a part of doing the work, right? So at the end of the day, maybe you're not writing articles anymore, but you're putting the information into the system, which is making it readily available at somebody else's fingertips in a way that they don't even have to search for it, right? They just have to be searching, they have to be kind of navigating through a similar problem, and then that thing that you thought of or that solution that you found is being presented right in front of them. Dave, anything to add to kind of that line of thought for the field?
I mean, that pretty much sums it up. My carrot to dangle in front of a guy or a technician that might be ready to retire to do this is, all right, sit at home for a week or two and not run service calls or travel. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that usually gets them to think about it and put it in. If I also tell them I really need this because when you're gone, there'll be no one that knows it. You kind of stroke that ego a little bit. The senior tech really loves to show. You talked about earlier. They like to challenge themselves and, hey, this is something I know and only I know. So that's how we kind of do that now, and it seems to be working pretty well.
I think that's a really good point. And you mentioned, right, because we talked about it earlier a little bit, right? It's the most challenging things, right? Because that's what we get stuck on. That's what we spend the most time on, right? The calls that come in, that's a run of the day thing, 60 seconds, 90 seconds, 2 minutes. I've got you good, right? I know what it is. It's the other stuff. It's the stuff that happens 1 in 100 times. That's, that's in Eric's brain or Pete's brain or Ed's brain or Steve's brain, right? Or Dave's brain, that it's like, and I think that's a really good way, and I'm sure other companies could adopt that as well. Is like, sit down and think of the most absolutely insane scenario that you've been in, and then walk through how you resolve that, right, and put that into the system. Because one, it lets people kind of have that moment to go to that place where like this is some of the most challenging things that we dealt with, right? That there probably is no troubleshooting tree for, right? There is no normal document for it because of a uniqueness in configuration or a mixture of equipment, or the blend between IT and how their network's set up and how we're using it, and all of those different things. So that's really good that you all are kind of pulling those champions out and showing the value of their information, right, by giving them the time to put it in. So I think that's the one thing that, if I kind of could put a note as a highlight, like if you have a lot of anomalies in some information that's in the brain of particular people, give them some time to get it out, right? And kind of regularly check back up with them and say, hey, is there anything else that you've thought of that you kind of want to add into the mix as well, so that it's contributing to the collective brain of the organization, right? That collective knowledge of the team.
And then one of the things, like we had an example, I forget the gentleman's name, it might have been Kevin, one of our champions. He found a problem, put it in Neuron7, and then like a month, 2 months later, we had the same issue out in California. Kevin's an East Coast guy. And historically, West Coast and East Coast don't talk, right? You got that whole, battle rap. It includes the technicians too.
Yeah.
So, this is something that Kevin battled for a week or two or something before he figured it out, put it in Neuron7. The technician puts the, what the heck, let's test out this tool. And he fixes the problem in 20 minutes, right?
Yeah.
So what would took 2 weeks for the first guy to do, takes 20 minutes for the second technician to do, and we get the customer back up and running. Now, the important part of all that story is we as a leadership team, we knew about this problem when we heard it happen the second time and the tech used it. We're congratulating both sides. Kevin, who put it in, and the technician, and I don't remember who the technician was that used it, for using the tool. So,
yeah.
And you publicize that, and you kind of you reinforce that behavior you want, right? And you brag about the tool, that because every tech has been there. Oh, Chuck out in Nebraska knew it, but why didn't I know it, right?
Yeah.
I don't know Chuck. So the tool bridges that gap where we, just because you know someone or know someone that knows the information, the tool does, and we can get that done and improve the problem, resolve the problem quickly.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I think right, like one of the definitions that people use for wisdom is knowledge applied, right? So when you talk about unstructured data, structured data, like there's information everywhere. But if you don't actually know how to apply it, it doesn't really help, right? So like all of this stuff should be out there. So when we talk about bridging that knowledge gap, what we're really doing is we're allowing people to attain wisdom, even if they haven't actually gone through the process and don't have the experience, because you can take, to your point, what Kevin did on the East Coast, right? And it took him all of this experience. It took him all of this trying and failing and trying and failing and in different. But when he got to the solution, right, like now he knows that. So that's the same thing. The next time Kevin runs into that problem, it probably will take Kevin 10 minutes to fix it, right? Where now if anyone runs into that problem, you've been able to take that information and structure it within a system that almost kind of helps people think through that. And then that turn-by-turn guidance, now it's directing them down the shortest path because somebody else already went left and it didn't work. I went right and it didn't work. But now it can give you like the proper GPS coordinates instead of almost like constantly recalculating because we're attempting something that makes sense, right? It's not the wrong thing, but it's not the best direction and the best path to take. So
correct.
So I would add to that from a remote support perspective. So in that same scenario, normally we'd consider our technical support for the field. So when a technician runs into something he's just never seen before, a lot of times they'll reach out to the call center to engage some senior support to help get a direction to go.
Yeah.
We're not a large company, right? We don't have dozens of people on the phones. So while we have some people with a lot of experience, it's 2 a.m, right on the West Coast. There's probably one option in the call center for you to talk to, and that might be a junior technician, meaning we may not be able to provide you the support you need to get moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
But this bridges that same gap. So even if that technician didn't use the tool and get to a resolution, we've got a second chance because the call center can do the same thing and they can use the same tool, and maybe they bridge that gap and get that technician on the right road. Where if that's 2 a.m. and we don't have access to this information and we have junior technicians on both ends of the phone, that might be we're waking some people up, or it's rolling into tomorrow, system down for a customer. So these are opportunities to succeed.
Yeah. No, that's in talking about success, right? And even the metrics and the way that we would measure those, right? Or what the challenges are. Like, what are some metrics that you use to measure the success of the efforts, specifically around like bridging that gap? We've talked about a few of them, but what are some of the tangible metrics that you use to kind of say that this is being effective in closing that gap, empowering the junior techs or freeing up the senior ones?
The biggest one, was kind of a return on investment, was warranty reduction year over year. We had close to, if I remember correctly, 100K, almost 100K in warranty reduction in year one. I think I figured it out. If you equate that to a service call that prevented something like 45 or 50 service calls. So that means there's 45 instances or whatever it was, that number was, where we're not pulling off of one customer site and making them upset to go fix a problem on another site. So, and so this is what was impressive about that 90, or that number was, in year one, we only did this for on-demand work. So that didn't count our commissioning or our maintenance, which we have rolled out now. So this was just stuff that we did as on-demand work. So break fix problems that we were going back to. So it was a big reduction, right? Now, not all of that was break fix. Part of that had to do with doing it, when we were on commissioning, you could use the intelligent search and do the stuff correctly the first time, which saved in that also. But that's one of the things we measured. We also used some transactional surveys. Before, I got a lot of comments about, quit sending me the new guy, send me the guy he's talking to on the phone. I don't see our comments at all. I make the joke all the time that if you have your phone up here, people don't think you're working, but if you're doing this little number here, they think you're, at least in the hospital field, they assume you're working because that's how they do their work orders too. So those stopped almost immediately after getting this. Now I get comments of, you need to hire more techs, like, fill in the new guy's name, which were pretty uncommon before. So those are the couple of areas. And then I'll let Josh talk about the call center and stuff, so he has a better knowledge on that.
No problem. And I'd plug, you mentioned we've moved these into our startup activities and stuff. So I would hope that we'll start to see that in our project margins, right? We should hopefully meet those goals a little better. From a remote support perspective, my watchword is service level. So we want to know how fast we're answering the phones, and customers' wait times are reduced. So I can track our service level. It's hard to correlate that to any one thing, but we've clearly had an impact from this tool. I couldn't tell you exactly how much, because there's a lot of different things that go into service level. However, another thing that I can track is how many calls we get from our field service organization versus customers. So over time, those requests for documentation, or I need a nudge in a direction, I need you to look at this wiring diagram, that's decreased steadily over time. And that's a pretty clear indication, because that has no reason to decrease unless we just have all new techs in the field. And that's not true.
Okay. And so, and there's one thing here, we've talked about it a little bit throughout, but I want to kind of emphasize it, because there's a lot of conversations, right, about the challenge with with field service, right? Like in support, with onboarding new people, with hiring new techs, right? And Dave knows, like, speaking at conferences over the last 8 to 10 years, it's been, we've got a talent gap, we've got a skills gap. And I know, just because I was at Translogic before, right, and then Swisslog Healthcare, that we've done some stuff to kind of mitigate that. But even with this, one of the data points that was on there is the reducing that onboarding time. Like, how do you feel for the different roles, Dave, like on the field service side that you're managing, and then Josh on the tech support side? How is this helping to change the profile of the kind of person that you need to hire? And Dave, seeing that you're overtraining as well, like, how has it changed your training? Has it shortened it? Is it, is it an essential part of training now? And we'll start with Dave on like the training side and the profile of the types of technicians you bring on board.
Yep. So historically, we would, as we're all three Navy vets, we'd try to go find a veteran that had some kind of technical background, that was getting out of the military, which obviously I don't have a problem with. But you may have a job location where someone's like, I don't want to live there.
Yeah.
They don't want to move to Iowa, or nothing against Iowa. I'm from Kansas, so I can't throw a stone too far. But you got to find the right person for that job, and sometimes that means a local person. So maybe you're trying to, the skill set isn't there in the location you're looking for. So now you're looking for, and we've done this in the past. All right, maybe we want better customer service experience that have people skills, and we can teach them the technical aspects of the job. Neuron7 allows you to do that much quicker. So you can get someone that's a people person, teach them the righty tighty lefty loosey kind of stuff, and then give them the confidence they can go out. So the onboarding shortens because they have this tool in their pocket. Where before our onboarding, we put you in training, a good 6 months to a year for an average technician, but it'd take 18 months for a technician before they felt confident enough to start to like the job, right? To understand the job and get their feet under them. We are now doing that in about 4 to 6 months. I mean, after 12 weeks, they're through our onboarding with the tool. They're running service calls. They're doing PMs. Now we've reduced that where they're feeling confident to 9 to 12 months. So we've cut it in half. And a lot of that has to do with having Neuron7 available for any issue they have. So it's changed kind of our hiring practices. So now I don't need that someone that has all the troubleshooting skills and the technical knowledge, and I can get them up to speed, which was I forgot to say earlier, which was another point for finance, right? If I can make a technician profitable sooner, then that helps the bottom line. So
Okay. And Josh, on your side?
I mean, it's similar in a lot of ways. Training up folks for the call center was challenging because we got to do the business in the meantime. So it was always a mixture of, listening to calls and OJT, and also doing the training classes like the FSEs do. But I like to say we're an inch deep and a mile wide. We have so many processes and administrative tasks and other things on top of troubleshooting that I don't usually have the time to dedicate to just teaching them how to troubleshoot equipment or be technically proficient, that we do in the field. And that's the center of their job, so that's appropriate. But for us, we have just a million other things that we also got to get proficient at. So it used to take us, I don't know, between 4 and 6 months to get somebody actually productive on the phones. They can take some very basic things, do some administrative functions in the background, but getting them so they can actually help customers fix things or technicians in the field to get to answers, very challenging. The intelligent search and how we can access the documentation was definitely a game changer for that. Means they can find answers for themselves and learn as they go. So they listen to another technician's call and they can just be curious and look through our documentation using the search or using the diagnostic tool to see, oh, that's how we did that. This is how you get from A to B. This is what they're talking about. They really self-train after we do the normal training. The last technician I hired, she was up and running and doing a great job on almost any context within about 3 months. And that was unheard of several years ago. It would take a lot longer. They might do some stuff, but they're not very productive when it comes down to it.
Yeah,
So
and then from a profile perspective, even the young woman that you mentioned, like, right, like we were, and I mean, and I was there, right? So years ago, not only were we were, it was taking us longer to hire and train people who had more experience. So I want to give you both credit, because what you're also saying is you're hiring people with less experience and you're training them in half as much time, right? So that's the right, because we were, you're hiring people with 10 years of experience. It still took you a year and a half to train them on your technology, your applications, your business processes. So I think that's the thing as well. It's almost like a multiplier. So like you've reduced it, but you've also been able to kind of pull in people and expand that candidate pool to get, younger people or people that just come from a different background that may not have that experience. And like Dave said, you can teach them the lefty loosey, the righty tighty, right? The troubleshooting stuff, but they've got the right behavior, they've got the right basic skill set, and now you've got this tool that helps them get to confidence faster. So, because like both of you mentioned confidence, which I think is a great thing, there's your training program, and then there's the confidence, right? Like no one has a year-long training program, but you train them, and then a lot of times you're shadowing them. You've got senior people backing them up, because the amount of time between when they complete training and when they actually feel confident standing on their own 2 feet, making a mistake or resolving a problem independently is normally 6 to 9 months after that, right? And that was something that I've always felt, and I've always loved training, right? But it's a difference between giving someone the information and them feeling confident doing it independently. So I wanted to pull those two things up because you both said it, but I wanted to kind of elevate that to the top, right? They're becoming confident faster. You've been able to reduce the training, and to Dave's point, the profitability of that technician, because I can get you revenue generating quicker, but I can also hire people that have less experience, which on the dollar side means I can also hire people that don't have to pay as much, right? And I don't have to keep increasing my starting salary by $5,000 to $10,000 year over year. I can keep my starting salary the same because I'm allowing people with less experience to come in. Go ahead, Josh.
What I wanted to say is to point directly to that. So it's not just about I can hire somebody cheaper to me. It's about now I can hire the people I want to hire.
Yeah.
I am way less concerned about their technical background now. I get to hire people for the things that I value in these positions, which is integrity and character and work ethic. I think that's what makes great technicians as opposed to good technicians. And if I'm confident that we can bridge the technical gap because of these tools that help them and the training, then I'm hiring you because you're the right person for the job, not necessarily the right technical background for the job. And that's what I've done. And it's been very successful.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And thanks for that, Josh. And I think that's a great way to put it, right? Like you can hire the right people. And I always, and Dave knows, and anyone else in the industry who's seen me in an event, I don't think we have a talent gap, right? Like there are things blocking us for hiring the kind of people that we want, because everybody wants people with integrity. Everybody wants people who have a passion for service and that have a strong work ethic. The problem is you haven't worked on my equipment in my industry or touched my devices. So like you said, the more that you can do to make that not an obstacle, the pool of the kind of people that you can hire expands. And then you can select those people who have the right cultural fit, the right behavioral fit for your team. And it kind of makes that recruitment strain or stress go away, right? Because I can bring people in who are a good fit, and then we've got tools to help make them successful. So I'm going to transition into some Q&A real quick. I'll ask a poll for the audience just to chime in to what is, we've talked about implementation, but what is some of the biggest barriers that you all face in trying to implement new technology? So what are some of those? And so we'll take a second to just allow people to drop a couple of responses in there before we transition to some closing questions. So thanks everybody for the feedback, and even thus far, Dave and Josh, for the great conversation that we've had thus far. So give a few minutes. I know people are engaged in working. So it's like here. So a lot of resistance to change for new technology there. All leaning towards resistance to change. All right. Well, we can cue that up. We had 100% on on resistance to change. So we talked about metrics a little bit, Josh. And before we take some questions, I want to talk about we talk about adoption of technology, right? And if there's value in it, then people will recognize it that way. So you all have worked with Neuron7 to kind of build out this champions program, and I'm gonna throw this up here and kind of put us in a that's a pretty good view there. So tell us about this, and I know again, you worked for me previously, so I know you're really into gamification to kind of like drive some healthy competition amongst the team. So what is the Neuron7 Champions program?
This is a way just for us to recognize, and Neuron7 to get involved in that process of recognizing the folks in the organization that have been the champions for the tools and for our implementation. So this is the first time we're doing this, so it's kind of a feel thing for me, because I'm not just getting whoever used the tool the most, I'm getting who I feel contributed most to the success of the program. So we gave a prize to the call center champion recently, who's one of my newer technicians. He's only been in the company for about a year, but he's just stormed out of the gate. And this tool was one of the reasons why, but he engages in improving the tool. He's one of the ones that comes to me when he notices something. This would work better if we had a button here, and how could I access this information better if we did this? And our relationship with Neuron7 is such that when we ask for changes and help them develop their own product, they're on it, right? We're changing things, we're updating this tool, we're getting it tailored to our usage to help everybody. And the input from these champions in the field and in the subject matter team and in the call center is what got us there, because I don't have all the bright ideas, or even many of them. They all come from our technicians that use the tool and other people in the organizations. So them buying in and doing this is why we wanted to recognize them in this list. So we did a meeting and gave them some prizes and stuff like that. We're still going out and doing regional champions. So we're going to get champions on other regional teams to make sure everybody feels the love. That subject matter expert champion, that's actually Kevin, who Dave was talking about before.
Yeah.
Great guy in the East Coast. So we realized we kind of need to vet the information going into the system, but we don't want it to be too onerous. So our subject matter experts actually have a tool where, as new information comes into the system, they get a view to it. So they can edit it, make sure the language is a little bit easier to read, or it makes sense, or there's less duplication. So I have a team of technicians that actually review the data monthly and make sure that what's coming into the system is good information, because garbage in, garbage out is a real thing.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Thanks for that and kind of explaining that. And and congratulations to those champions, right, that have been recognized. Good old Kevin Williams. I remember when I met him shortly after he got out the military, and I delivered him his Dodge Journey back in the day. So it's awesome to see him still there and leading and contributing. So we're gonna take a few questions here. I'm going to the list. So we had a question for Liz, and I really love this feature. It'll pop up here. So the question, and either one of you can answer it: how do you plan to continue addressing the knowledge gap as your organization evolves?
I think adoption of the program, kind of from both the senior and the newer technician, kind of resolves that problem from the get-go. As people learn that this tool will help more and more, and the recognition we provide when they do this, like the Champions program, it kind of, people are going to want to share their knowledge in there, because we're all human. We want a little recognition here and there. So I think that helps to resolve it by having a program like the Champions program and acknowledging people on, hey, yeah, we appreciate you doing that. Or, me mentioning Kevin on this call in front of, that will be recorded. So if you know Kevin, that's going to stroke his ego quite a bit. So I think it's things like that. It's really adoption was a well down to. So
yeah. Okay.
Your question, Liz.
All right. So we got one more here. We've got a question from Nicole. It seems similar to a question from someone named Kevin, who's also watching right now. So I'll put this one up on the screen here. What are some key lessons you learned during your journey that you would recommend to other service leaders facing similar challenges?
Yep. So, and Josh, you can jump in if you want to. The first thing, I think the easy win with intelligent search to get people to buy into the change was probably the key lesson that we didn't learn, but we got right. And the second one was we should have listened to our partner in Neuron7 when they told us our information wasn't as good as we thought it was. Don't, swallow your pride, listen to the experts, and take the time in the beginning. Luckily, we, as a leadership team, we decided early when we saw the information we were putting out, to pull it back and redo it. Those are probably the two biggest to help drive adoption, get an early win, and second, listen to your partner. That's, they do this every day. I don't. I should listen to them. They're the experts. The same thing I want my customers doing when my techs are there, I didn't do and I should have done.
Yeah.
So, Josh, you have anything to add to
that? I mean, it's kind of the same kind of thing, but it's honesty about your organization, what you're capable of and what you currently have access to, and your data. So not just your data though, but how do we currently behave? What are our capabilities? If you want to improve things, you have to be honest about where that is so you can make your strategy actually fit that problem. If you think your data is awesome, even though in your heart of hearts you know it's not, then you just created a problem for yourself on top of the first one. If you think your technicians are going to be resistant to adoption and you don't have a strategy to deal with that, like bringing in some of the ones you think are the problem and creating champions out of those guys, then you're going to fail. If you just think, no, our technicians are great, they're all going to listen to this. You got to know yourself and be honest with your organization.
And yeah, that's a great point. Not only do you want them to be your champion, but if you get them on board, so not only people that are slow to adoption, like they're slow to change, we brought on, but I also made sure we brought on the people that were vocal, right? They're the leaders out in the organization, right? We all know who we go to. We want to get the dirt on something. I brought those people in because they're going to spread the word that, hey, this tool is really good. And because it gets around quicker when certain individuals are behind something. So know your organization and kind of cherry pick those people that will help you drive adoption, because it means a lot more when a peer says it than some guy sitting in an office like me. So that was probably another lesson we learned.
Yeah, no, I think that's an awesome point, Dave, like you said. And so we put that up already. So let's go to, Brian had a question here. How do you manage the concerns companies have about cybersecurity issues?
Go ahead, Josh.
I mean, it lacks a little context. So do we mean in the usage of the tools? If we do, any of our technicians can access this. We access it through Salesforce. It's on board in Salesforce. So if they have the Salesforce mobile app on their phone, they can be on a guest network in a hospital, in our case, or a company or vendor you're working with, and use these tools, no problem. It shouldn't impact their network at all. As far as the data, we don't use any customer-specific data or company-specific data outside of our own in these apps or tools. So that shouldn't be a problem either.
Yeah. Okay. And let me see. And Kevin did have a slight variation, right? So his is really like, what's some advice you would give to service leaders who are just at the beginning to use AI to capture knowledge in their organization? So almost if you're building it from scratch, right? And you're in that beginning, what advice would you give to service leaders that are starting that journey?
Yep. I would say, really look over your data and determine how well it is or how good it is. And don't be afraid to spend, lock a couple of technicians, and I don't mean that literally, but I did feed them in a room together and for a couple of weeks and work through some problems. There's no AI tool in the world that can make magic and turn information that isn't there into usable information. So if you were like us, or an organization that had tons of data, I mean, We're talking 15, 16, 20 years of data. And some of it was usable, but most was not. So I would say one of the good things we did before we went to this, and it wasn't my idea, I believe it was Roy's when he worked here, was start to build a knowledge base program so that we had a library to go to. So if you haven't done that already, that's the first thing I would do, because there's a lot of knowledge. Like the engineers put a lot of stuff in the manual, but I can tell you a tech has figured out 13 ways to do it faster and easier. 13 different ways, because you talk to 13 different techs, they do it 13 different ways. So they have that information out there, but they don't share it a lot. They may teach it, if they're a trainer, they may teach someone this or that. But if you get that information into some kind of written document, then it's available for you to look at and turn into for the AI tool to use. So that's the number one thing. Getting a technician to put what his thoughts are on paper are usually tough. So on that, you just got to figure out rewards that are based on the technician, right? We kind of customize it per who we're, I have one guy I know that, if I buy him dinner at the end of the week, he's all about it. Another tech is he travels a lot. So if he gets to stay home for a week to do something, that's his reward. So you kind of base it on that. So hopefully that answered your question, Kevin.
All right. Trying to remove that. There we go. No, and I would add, and Dave, I think you touched on something key as we kind of wrap up here. It's that, right? Like you still need the knowledge from somewhere, right? So like if you want the system to make a recommendation for the best resolution, you still need that information somewhere. So I think the one thing, and and I know you all did it at Translogic, it's starting to get people just to write it down, right? So whatever format that is, if you're trying to be AI ready, the thing is, then you've got to document you got to document the best solutions, right? So how do you incentivize that behavior? How you capture it from your technicians? There's a lot of ways to approach it, but at the end of the day, right? You can, I know we had objectives at Translogic about how many knowledge articles you could write or how many you had to contribute to, right? It just kind of established an environment of you have knowledge that is valuable. We find it valuable, and we want to incentivize you and reward you and recognizing you for sharing it. So I think at the end of the day, regardless of what tool you have, if you don't have it built into your culture for people to share the solution, for them to document it. I love what you said earlier, Dave. You said everybody's become like mini tech writers because you want to have the good answer that's in there that gets the thumbs up, right? That this worked and this helped me solve a problem. Because before they knew no one was looking at it, right? They knew that their work order became an invoice. The only thing that really transferred was like maybe one line about a problem and then the parts that were used. So one of the reasons technicians don't document it enough, because as organizations, we didn't value it. We didn't do anything with that information. So it's elevating the reality that this information is valuable. The resolutions are there because resolution intelligence, AI or non-AI, is not going to work without the resolution. So whether you've got to lock people in a room, right, feed them, give them an opportunity, or individually incentivize people to share what they have that's important and that's valuable, I think that's a significant thing to do. So I want to thank you all for joining us today, and Dave and Josh for just sharing their time and with us here on the Service Strategies Lab to talk about knowledge transfer and how they've closed that gap using Neuron7. So congrats to the N7 champions, and appreciate Translogic working with Neuron7 to do something to recognize the technicians in the field, because they're extremely valuable. We need more of them. And from an industry perspective, the better we can make this industry, the healthier we can make this industry. Hopefully, the more we can continue to grow it and help people have careers and jobs and success like all of us have here on the call. So thanks for your time. Good to see you guys as always. And that'll wrap up our session for today. Join us next time for the next series of the Service Strategy Labs, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.